Ah, cells. They make up all living things. Plants, animals, fungi, even bacteria. But you may ask yourself, how is this made up of the same things as this? Well, dear listener, the answer lies in genes. All you really need to know about genes is that there are small sections of DNA that control how your cells do things. Each cell has a fixed number of genes, and each gene controls something about you. Some genes control outward traits like eye color, but most control other things like what proteins your cells make and where those proteins go, things that make your body function. You have two complete sets of genes in each of your cells, one from your father and one from your mother. Each gene from your father has a corresponding one from your mother that controls the same thing, which means each aspect of you is a product of constant argument between your parents' genes. Now, these gene sets, also called genomes, aren't exactly the same as those found in your parents' cells. This is because of meiosis. Meiosis is the cell division process immediately before sexual reproduction. When one of your cells undergoes meiosis, it first condenses its DNA and thus its genes into a structure called a chromosome. The corresponding paternal and maternal genes are found on chromosomes with identical structure, called homologous chromosomes. The cell then doubles the number of chromosomes it has and divides. Each of those two cells then divides again, making a total of 4 new cells. For those of you following along, that means each new cell now has 1/2 the amount of chromosomes of a normal cell, or just one set. Okay, you may be saying, that sounds pretty simple. 2 cells with maternal genes, 2 with paternal. Not so fast. You see, before your cell does anything, it mixes up its genes, sort of like a giant lottery. Each homologous chromosome from your mother and each from your father come together and combine, each chromosome switching some sections of its DNA and thus its genes and genome with its homologous opposite, creating completely new chromosomes, like some sort of Frankenstein's monster. These new chromosomes and their unadulterated copies now split. This means that for each of the 4 new cells, you have 4 different sets of genes. These cells are called gametes, and they are what makes you. Literally. When your mother and father reproduced to make you, 2 of these gametes, called an egg from your mother and a sperm from your father, combine to form one cell with a complete set of chromosomes. Chromosomes that, importantly, are different from either of your parents. That cell, dear listener, then grew and divided into the trillions of cells that make up you. Now, there's a huge element of randomness in this entire process. Which genes were exchanged between which chromosomes, which of the chromosomes ended up in which cell with which other chromosomes, which gametes containing which chromosomes happen to combine and form you, all of this is random. So random, in fact, that you are literally just one among a truly astronomical number of outcomes. Now, this huge number of outcomes possible by meiosis and sexual reproduction means there is a huge variation of genomes in the human gene pool. Each of the several billion people has a unique genome synthesized from their parents, and their parents' parents, and so on. If you've been paying close attention and are familiar with evolution, you might have noticed that we've covered 2 of its prerequisites, inheritance and variation. Genes are hereditary. They can be passed down from parent to offspring, and they have a huge variation from sexual reproduction. If we add to that the many, many selections of nature, like the availability of food, and a lot of time, say billions of years, we get evolution. Evolution acts on the huge variation of genomes produced by meiosis by killing the organisms with the worst genomes. Actual evolution is a lot more complicated than this and involves mutations that create new genes, but suffice it to say that it tests all the gene combinations against each other in a sort of cellular tournament. Each new generation, a new selection of gene combinations, and evolution picks the best ones. Note that we aren't actually comparing actual genes here, just genomes, the combinations of genes. Meiosis creates new genomes, and evolution compares them against each other, choosing the victors and repeating the process over and over. Over time, this causes organisms to specialize at whatever they do and adapt to do it better. That leads to some pretty complex organisms, turning this into this. So, the complexity of life can be traced through evolution to the variation of genomes, which is due, at least in part, to the process of meiosis. And that's everything you ever wanted to know about meiosis.